What if I told you that while a pregnant woman's husband was secretly planning to divorce her, steal custody of their unborn child, and leave her homeless and penniless, she was quietly building $1 million empire from her spare bedroom? This is the incredible true story of Sarah Martinez, who discovered her husband's betrayal through a baby monitor and turned his calculated cruelty into the foundation of a $50 million business empire. From frozen bank accounts to viral fame, from custody battles to Forbes features, this is proof that sometimes the people trying to destroy you end up creating exactly what you were meant to become. Hit that like button if you're ready for an inspiring story of ultimate revenge through success. And don't forget to subscribe, because you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Sarah Martinez pressed her hand against her swollen belly, feeling her 8-month-old daughter kick as she climbed the stairs to check on the baby monitor. The device had been crackling with static all evening, and she wanted to make sure the nursery was ready for when little Sophia arrived. As she reached the landing, David's voice drifted through the monitor speaker, crystal clear from his home office below. "No, Jessica, we stick to the plan." Her husband's voice carried the same cold tone he used in board meetings. "The divorce papers get filed next week, right after the baby's born. That gives us maximum leverage for custody." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She sank onto the nursery chair, her hand instinctively protecting her belly. "But what if she fights it?" Jessica's voice replied. Sarah recognized the sultry tone their 24-year-old nanny used when she wanted something. "She's not as stupid as you think, David." David's laugh was harsh. "Sarah, please. I've been preparing for this for months. All our joint accounts are already transferred to my business entities. Her credit cards are linked to my approval. She has no idea what's coming." Sarah felt the world spinning around her. 6 months. They'd been planning this for 6 months, while she carried his child. "The house deed was never in her name," David continued. "I made sure of that when we bought it. Once the baby's born, we can claim she's emotionally unstable postpartum. You'll testify as the concerned caregiver who witnessed her erratic behavior." "What about her job?" Jessica asked. "What job?" David's voice dripped with satisfaction. "I've been subtly sabotaging every opportunity that came her way. That marketing director position at Thompson Industries, I know the CEO personally. One conversation about her reliability issues and that offer disappeared. She thinks the job market is just tough right now." Sarah pressed her fist to her mouth to stifle a sob. The rejections, the missed callbacks, the sudden cold shoulders from companies that had initially been enthusiastic. It hadn't been bad luck or a difficult market. It had been David. "You're brilliant," Jessica purred. "When do we tell her?" "After the baby's born and custody is established. By then, she'll be broke, homeless, and legally classified as an unfit mother. She'll have no choice but to accept whatever settlement I offer." The monitor went silent except for the sound of David's chair creaking. Sarah heard Jessica's heels clicking across the hardwood floor of his office. Sarah sat in the darkened nursery, surrounded by the crib she'd carefully assembled, the mobile she'd hung with such hope, the tiny clothes she'd folded with dreams of family moments that would never come. Her marriage wasn't just ending. It was being systematically destroyed by the man she'd trusted with everything. But David had made one crucial mistake in his calculations. In all his planning and scheming, he'd never bothered to check what Sarah had been doing during those long days alone in the house while he worked, and Jessica ran errands. For the past 8 months, while dealing with morning sickness and growing a human being, Sarah had been building something else, something David knew nothing about. From her small home office upstairs, she'd been running a dropshipping business focused on sustainable baby products. What had started as a way to research the best items for her own baby had evolved into something much bigger. The business had grown slowly at first, just a few $100s a month. But Sarah's marketing background had kicked in, and she'd begun applying everything she knew about consumer psychology and digital marketing. Last month, her online store had generated $50,000 in revenue. David thought he'd left her with nothing. He had no idea she'd been building her own empire while he planned her destruction. Sarah stood up slowly, her hands still protective over her belly. Sophia kicked again, as if sensing her mother's determination. "Don't worry, baby girl," Sarah whispered. "Mommy's got this." The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a sheriff's deputy who looked uncomfortable as he handed Sarah the papers. She was wearing her favorite maternity dress, the blue one David had complimented months ago when he still pretended to love her. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the deputy said, not meeting her eyes. "You have 30 days to vacate the premises." Sarah stared at the document, her hands trembling. According to the paperwork, the house had been in foreclosure for 3 months. David had stopped making mortgage payments while continuing to tell her everything was fine. "There must be some mistake," she managed. "This is my home. My name is on the deed." The deputy shifted uncomfortably. "According to county records, the sole owner is David Coleman. Are you a tenant?" The words hit her like a physical blow. Tenant. In the home where she'd lived for 2 years, where she'd painted the nursery and planned her future. Sarah closed the door and leaned against it, the eviction notice crumpling in her fist. David had left for a business trip that morning, kissing her forehead and telling her he'd be back in 3 days. He'd probably planned it this way, giving himself an alibi while his pregnant wife discovered she was about to be homeless. She pulled out her phone and called Maya Chen, her best friend from college who'd become a successful divorce attorney. "Sarah, what's wrong?" Maya's voice was immediately concerned. "I need help," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "David is divorcing me, and I think I'm about to lose everything." "I'll be right over." Maya arrived within an hour, her sleek black car pulling into the driveway like a lifeline. She was everything Sarah had once been: professionally dressed, confident, in control of her life. She took one look at Sarah's tear-stained face and the crumpled eviction notice and went into full attorney mode. "Tell me everything," Maya said, settling onto the couch with a legal pad. Sarah recounted the conversation she'd overheard, David's systematic sabotage of her career, and the financial manipulation she was only beginning to understand. Maya's expression grew darker with each revelation. "This is financial abuse," Maya said when Sarah finished. "Classic pattern. Isolate the victim, control the resources, then strike when they're most vulnerable." She looked at Sarah's swollen belly. "He timed this perfectly. You're 8 months pregnant, financially dependent, and about to have a newborn. Most women in your position would have no choice but to accept whatever he offers." "Most women," Sarah repeated. "But not me." Maya raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, for the first time in days?" Sarah smiled. "David thinks he knows everything about my life, but there's something he missed." She led Maya upstairs to her small home office, a converted spare bedroom David rarely entered. The room was modest but organized: a desk with 2 monitors, a ring light for video calls, and boxes of inventory stacked neatly along one wall. Maya picked up one of the package's organic bamboo baby bottles with Sarah's company logo. "You're running a business." "I started it 8 months ago," Sarah explained, pulling up her sales dashboard. "Sustainable baby products, direct to consumer. I handle all the marketing and customer service. The suppliers ship directly to customers." Maya stared at the numbers on the screen. Sarah, this shows $50,000 in revenue last month. $53,412. Sarah corrected. After expenses, I netted about $38,000. I've been reinvesting most of it back into inventory and advertising. Where's the money? Business account at a credit union David doesn't know about. Everything is under my maiden name, Martinez. Sarah pulled up her bank statements. I have about $200,000 in the business account and another $50,000 in a personal emergency fund. Maya sat down heavily in the desk chair. You've been running a $250,000 business from your spare bedroom while your husband planned to leave you destitute. He always dismissed what I did up here as playing on the computer, Sarah said. He never asked about it, never showed any interest. I think he assumed I was just shopping online or scrolling through social media. This changes everything, Maya said, her lawyer's mind already racing. We can file for emergency spousal support, challenge the house foreclosure, and if he's been hiding assets while claiming you're financially dependent, that's fraud. Sarah felt a surge of hope for the first time since hearing that devastating conversation through the baby monitor. But beneath the hope was something harder, more determined. David had tried to destroy her life systematically, calculating every move to leave her powerless. He had no idea what she was capable of building. Maya, Sarah said, I don't just want to survive this divorce. I want to win. Maya's law office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass walls and modern furniture that spoke of success. Sarah felt out of place in her maternity clothes, but Maya's secretary treated her with the same respect as any high-powered client. The good news, Maya said, spreading documents across her conference table, is that David's financial manipulation is actually going to work in our favor. Courts don't look kindly on spouses who try to hide assets while claiming their partner is financially irresponsible. Sarah reviewed the papers Maya had prepared, restraining orders on joint accounts, demands for financial discovery, emergency motions for spousal support. It looked overwhelming. The challenging part, Maya continued, is that he's going to claim your business income makes you financially independent. He'll argue you don't need support. But I built this business while he was sabotaging my career, Sarah protested. I know, and we'll prove that, but courts move slowly, and David seems like the type to play dirty. Maya's expression was serious. You need to be prepared for him to attack the business itself. Sarah's phone buzzed with a notification from her business dashboard. Another order. Even sitting in a lawyer's office discussing her failing marriage, her customers were buying products, trusting her company to deliver quality items for their babies. I need to ask you something, Sarah said. What would happen if I grew the business significantly during the divorce proceedings? Would that hurt my case? Maya considered this. It could work either way. On one hand, it shows you're capable and self-sufficient. On the other hand, he might argue you were hiding your earning potential throughout the marriage. But if I'm making enough money to be financially independent, doesn't that protect me from his manipulation? In theory, yes. But Sarah, growing a business while going through a contentious divorce and having a baby is going to be incredibly difficult. Sarah looked out the window at the city below. Somewhere down there, David was probably in a meeting, planning her destruction while presenting himself as a successful CEO. Jessica was likely shopping with the credit cards that still worked, oblivious to the fact that her sugar daddy's empire was about to crumble. I've been thinking about expansion, Sarah said. Right now, I'm only selling baby products, but my customers trust my brand. They associate it with quality and authenticity. What if I expanded into toddler products, then children's items? What if I started offering consulting services for other parents starting businesses? Maya raised an eyebrow. You're talking about scaling significantly. I'm talking about building something David can't touch, can't manipulate, and can't take away from me. Sarah's voice grew stronger with each word. He spent months planning to leave me with nothing. I'm going to spend the next few months building something so strong that his plans become irrelevant. That's ambitious. Do you have the capital? Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Maya her business account balance. $200,000 in liquid capital, and I've been approved for a business line of credit for another $300,000. My profit margins are good, and my customer acquisition cost is low because of word-of-mouth referrals. You've really thought this through. I've had a lot of time to think while lying awake at night, listening to David come home late from his business meetings with Jessica. Sarah's hand moved to her belly. This baby deserves a mother who can provide for her without depending on anyone else's generosity or goodwill. Maya made notes on her legal pad. If you're serious about this expansion, we need to make sure everything is legally protected. Business structure, intellectual property, contracts with suppliers. We can't give David any opening to claim ownership or sabotage the operation. What about timing? Should I wait until after the divorce is final? Actually, the opposite, Maya said. If you grow the business during the proceedings, it demonstrates that your success isn't dependent on marital assets. It shows the court that you built this independently, despite David's attempts to undermine you. Sarah felt a familiar kick from Sophia, as if her daughter was encouraging her mother's ambitions. Then let's do it. Let's build an empire. Over the next 2 weeks, while David remained out of town on his suspiciously extended business trip, Sarah threw herself into expansion planning. She researched new product lines, reached out to additional suppliers, and began developing a consulting program for other work-from-home parents. The irony wasn't lost on her that David's abandonment was giving her exactly what she needed time and space to build without his interference. He thought he was leaving her isolated and vulnerable. Instead, he'd given her the freedom to become everything he'd tried to prevent her from being. Her revenue jumped from $50,000 to $75,000 in 2 weeks. Customer reviews were consistently 5 stars. Her email list grew by 3,000 subscribers. Sarah was building her empire one sale at a time, and David had no idea the foundation of his revenge plan was already crumbling beneath his feet. David returned from his business trip on a Thursday evening, walking into the house with the confidence of a man who believed he held all the cards. Sarah was in the kitchen, preparing dinner as she had countless times before, but everything between them had changed. "How was your trip?" she asked, not looking up from the vegetables she was chopping. "Productive," he said, loosening his tie. "Closed a major deal with investors. Should set us up nicely for the future." The casual cruelty of his words struck her. There was no us anymore, and they both knew it. But David was still playing the part of the devoted husband, maintaining his facade until he was ready to drop the bomb. "That's wonderful," Sarah replied evenly. "I'm glad things are going well for you." David studied her for a moment, perhaps sensing something different in her tone. "Everything okay here? You seem calm." "Why wouldn't I be? I'm about to have our baby. Our marriage is strong, and I feel very secure in our future together." Sarah met his eyes directly, watching for any flicker of reaction. If David felt any guilt about his deception, he hid it well. "Of course. I just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself. No stress, no overexertion. I've been keeping busy with my little online project," Sarah said, returning to her chopping. "It's been growing quite a bit lately." "That's nice, honey. Just don't wear yourself out playing on the computer." "Playing on the computer?" Sarah's knife paused for just a moment before continuing its steady rhythm. In the past month, while David was planning her destruction, her little project had generated over $150,000 in revenue. That weekend, David announced he needed to work late at the office. Sarah knew he was with Jessica, probably celebrating their upcoming victory. Instead of dwelling on his betrayal, she used the time productively. She scheduled video calls with 3 potential major retailers interested in carrying her products. The largest, a nationwide chain specializing in eco-friendly family products, wanted to discuss an exclusive partnership potentially worth $2 million annually. Sunday evening, as Sarah was updating her business projections, David's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and stepped outside to take the call privately. Sarah couldn't hear the conversation, but when he returned, his expression had changed. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Fine," he said curtly. "Just some complications with the investor deal." Over the next few days, David's mood grew increasingly volatile. He snapped at Sarah over minor things: dishes left in the sink, the thermostat setting, the television volume. Sarah recognized the behavior from her business psychology courses. He was projecting his stress onto her, trying to create conflicts that he could later use as evidence of her instability. On Wednesday evening, while Sarah was in her office fulfilling orders, David appeared in the doorway. She hadn't heard him approach, and his sudden presence made her jump. "You're working late," he observed. "Just finishing up some customer service emails," Sarah said, minimizing her spreadsheet windows. "This pregnancy insomnia is actually useful for getting things done." David stepped into the room, looking around with new interest. His eyes lingered on the inventory boxes, the professional lighting setup, the multiple monitors displaying what were clearly business applications. "Exactly how much money are you making from this hobby?" he asked. Sarah's heart rate spiked, but she kept her voice casual. "Oh, you know, a little here and there. It covers some of the baby expenses." "I think you're being modest," David said, moving closer to her desk. "That looks like serious equipment for a hobby." "I wanted to do it right," Sarah replied. "Besides, you always said I should have interests that keep me busy while you're working." David's eyes were calculating now, and Sarah realized she'd made an error. He was smarter than she'd given him credit for, and her business success was becoming too obvious to hide. "Sarah," David said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone he used when he thought he was being generous. "I think it's wonderful that you found something productive to do, but you need to be careful about tax implications, business licenses, that sort of thing. Maybe I should have my accountant take a look at your setup." "That's very thoughtful," Sarah said, "but I've already consulted with a business attorney about proper structure and compliance." The moment the words left her mouth, Sarah knew she'd revealed too much. David's expression shifted from condescending concern to sharp attention. "A business attorney. For a hobby." "I wanted to make sure I was doing everything legally," Sarah said, trying to recover. "You know how careful I am about following rules." But David wasn't buying her explanation anymore. He was looking at her with the same calculating expression she'd seen him use with business competitors he was planning to destroy. "I think," David said slowly, "we need to have a serious conversation about what you've really been doing up here." Sarah felt Sophia kick hard, as if sensing the tension in the room. The facade was crumbling, and David was beginning to realize that his carefully planned devastation might not go as smoothly as he'd anticipated. The war was about to begin in earnest. The conversation Sarah had been dreading came the next morning over breakfast. David sat across from her at their kitchen table, the same table where they'd shared countless meals and planned their future together. But now his expression was cold, businesslike. I've been thinking about our conversation last night, he began, stirring his coffee with mechanical precision. I'm concerned about this business venture of yours. Sarah kept her voice steady. What concerns you? Well, for starters, you've been operating without my knowledge. As your husband, I have a legal interest in any income-generating activities you pursue during our marriage. The legal terminology wasn't accidental. David was laying groundwork, and Sarah recognized the strategy from her business law courses. I never hid anything from you, Sarah replied carefully. You've seen me working up there every day. You just never asked about specifics. Because you led me to believe it was a hobby. David's voice sharpened. Now I discover you've hired attorneys, established business entities, potentially generated significant unreported income. That sounds like deliberate deception to me. Sarah felt her carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. Unreported income. David, I've filed quarterly taxes, maintained proper records, done everything completely legally. Without consulting me, without including me in financial decisions that affect our household. David leaned forward, his boardroom intimidation tactics on full display. Sarah, I'm trying to protect our family's interests here, but your secretive behavior is making that difficult. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment Sarah almost questioned her own actions. Almost. Then Sophia kicked, reminding her of everything she was fighting for. You want to know about secretive behavior, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. Let's talk about the house deed that was never in my name. Let's discuss the joint accounts I supposedly have access to but can't actually access. Let's examine why every job opportunity I've pursued in the past year has mysteriously evaporated. David's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculating predator beneath. Then he recovered, arranging his features into an expression of hurt confusion. Sarah, you're not making sense. Are you feeling all right? I'm worried this pregnancy stress is affecting your judgment. And there it was. The setup Jessica had mentioned, Sarah's erratic behavior and poor judgment that would be used against her in custody proceedings. My judgment is fine, Sarah said evenly, clear enough to recognize manipulation when I see it. David stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I think you need help. Sarah, professional help. This paranoia. These accusations, this secretive behavior with money, these aren't the actions of a stable person. And I think, Sarah replied, rising to face him, that you're about to discover you severely underestimated who you're dealing with. For a moment, they stared at each other across the kitchen table where they'd once planned baby names and discussed nursery colors. The pretense was finally dead. And both of them knew it. David's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled, the expression transforming his face into something Sarah barely recognized. Actually, Sarah, I think it's time we discuss the future, honestly, he said. I've filed for divorce. The papers will be served this afternoon. Sarah's heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral. I see. I've also filed for emergency custody of the baby, citing concerns about your mental stability and recent erratic behavior regarding finances. David's voice was matter of fact, as if he were discussing quarterly projections. Jessica will testify about the concerning changes she's observed in your behavior over the past few months. What changes would those be? Secretive behavior, financial deception, mood swings, isolation from friends and family, classic signs of postpartum depression beginning during pregnancy. The clinical precision of his attack took Sarah's breath away. He'd planned every detail, anticipated every angle. Jessica would present herself as the concerned caregiver who'd witnessed Sarah's decline. David would be the reluctant but responsible father protecting his child from an unstable mother. "There's something else," David continued, pulling out his phone. "I've been documenting your behavior for months. Audio recordings of emotional outbursts, photos of you working obsessively at all hours, videos of you talking to yourself while working." Sarah realized with growing horror that her private moments of stress, her muttered frustrations during difficult calls, her late-night work sessions fueled by pregnancy insomnia had all been weaponized against her. "Of course, this could all be avoided," David said, his tone becoming magnanimous. "If you're willing to be reasonable about the settlement, sign over any claim to marital assets, agree to limited visitation, and transfer ownership of your little business to compensate for the household income you've been hiding. You want me to give you my business. I want what's legally mine as your husband," David corrected. "But I'm willing to be generous. You can keep a small consulting role, earn some pocket money, just enough to maintain some independence." Sarah looked at this man she'd loved, this man whose child she was carrying, and saw him clearly for the first time. He wasn't content to leave her with nothing. He wanted to take the one thing she'd built independently and claim it as his own achievement. "I need time to consider your offer," Sarah said quietly. "Of course," David replied, his confidence absolute. "But don't take too long. The custody hearing is scheduled for next week, and your business bank accounts will be frozen pending resolution of the marital asset questions." As David left for work, Sarah sat in their kitchen, surrounded by the ruins of the life she'd thought she was building. But beneath the devastation, something harder was crystallizing. David had shown her exactly who he was, and now she knew exactly what she was fighting. He wanted a war, she'd give him one. The business account freeze hit Sarah's PayPal and bank account simultaneously at 9 a.m. on Friday, just as she was processing orders for the weekend shipping deadline. One moment she was confirming payments for $3,000 worth of products. The next, every transaction was declined. Sarah stared at her computer screen, watching order after order fail to process. Her customers were buying products they needed, trusting her company to deliver, and now she couldn't fulfill a single sale. Her phone rang immediately. Maya's voice was tense. "Sarah, I just got the emergency motion David filed. He's claiming your business income represents hidden marital assets and potential fraud. The court froze all accounts pending investigation. How long will that take? Could be weeks, maybe months." Maya's frustration was evident. This is a common tactic in contentious divorces. Even if we prove the accounts should be unfrozen, he's bought himself time to destroy your business momentum. Sarah felt the familiar kick from Sophia, but this time it felt different, weaker. She pressed her hand to her belly, sudden anxiety flooding through her. "Maya, I need to call you back." The cramping started an hour later, not the regular Braxton Hicks contractions she'd been experiencing, but something sharper, more insistent. Sarah called her obstetrician, who told her to come in immediately. Dr. Rodriguez's examination was thorough but concerning. "Your blood pressure is elevated, and you're showing signs of significant stress," she said. "At 8 months, this could trigger preterm labor. Is the baby okay?" "For now, yes. But Sarah, your cortisol levels are through the roof. This level of stress isn't just bad for you, it's dangerous for Sophia." Sarah lay on the examination table, staring at the ultrasound monitor showing her daughter's heartbeat, strong and steady, but dependent entirely on Sarah's ability to stay healthy and stable. "I'm going through a difficult divorce," Sarah said quietly. "Doctor..." Rodriguez nodded with the weary understanding of someone who'd seen this pattern before. "I'm going to recommend modified bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy. That means no work stress, no financial pressure, no emotional upheaval. Can you manage that?" Sarah almost laughed at the impossibility of the request. No work stress while her business collapsed, no financial pressure while her accounts were frozen, no emotional upheaval while fighting for custody of her unborn child. "I'll do whatever's necessary to protect my baby," Sarah said instead. That evening, sitting in the quiet house David had abandoned, Sarah made a decision that surprised even her. She called her father. Carlos Martinez answered on the second ring, his voice cautious. Sarah hadn't spoken to him in over 2 years, not since the argument about David that had driven a wedge between them. "Mija." Carlos's voice softened when he heard her tears. "What's wrong?" "Dad, I think I need help." Carlos arrived within an hour, his contractor's truck looking out of place in David's upscale neighborhood. He was older than Sarah remembered, gray threading through his dark hair, but his embrace was exactly as strong as it had been when she was little. "Tell me everything," he said, settling onto the couch beside her. Sarah explained the business, the divorce, the frozen accounts, the custody battle. Carlos listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "This David," he said when she finished, "he reminds me of the developers who try to steal land from families who've lived there for generations. They use lawyers and banks and bureaucracy to take what isn't theirs. I built something good, Dad, something that was helping families, and now he's destroying it just because he can." Carlos was quiet for a long moment. "You know, Mija, I've been following your business online, reading the customer reviews, watching the social media posts. You've built something remarkable." Sarah looked at her father in surprise. "You have. A father pays attention even when his daughter is too stubborn to talk to him," Carlos said with a gentle smile. "I saw the interview you did with that parenting blogger last month. The way you talked about supporting working mothers, about building community through business, I was proud. Why didn't you say anything? Because you needed to build it yourself first, but now you need help, and that's what family is for." Carlos pulled out his phone and showed Sarah a business contact list that stretched for pages. 40 years in construction teaches you something about building from the ground up and about dealing with people who try to tear down what you've built. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," Carlos said, "that we teach your ex-husband what happens when he messes with a Martinez family business." That night, for the first time in weeks, Sarah slept peacefully, not because her problems were solved, but because she was no longer facing them alone. The empire she'd built single-handedly was about to become a family operation, and David Coleman had no idea what he'd unleashed. Elena Rodriguez arrived at Sarah's house on Monday morning with the energy of someone who'd built and sold 3 companies before turning 45. Sarah's former mentor from her marketing days looked exactly the same designer clothes that somehow managed to be both professional and approachable, silver hair styled in a way that commanded respect, and the kind of confident smile that made investors reach for their checkbooks. "When Carlos called me, I dropped everything," Elena said, settling into Sarah's living room with a leather portfolio that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "He told me his daughter was building something extraordinary and needed backup against a predator." Sarah felt a flutter of nerves. She'd idolized Elena during her brief marketing career, but that felt like a lifetime ago. Now she was a pregnant woman in sweatpants, fighting for survival. "I appreciate you coming, but I'm not sure what help I can offer anyone right now," Sarah said. "My business accounts are frozen, my inventory is stuck in warehouses I can't access, and my customers are asking for refunds I can't process." Elena opened her portfolio and pulled out printed pages. "Before we talk about your immediate problems, Let's discuss what you've built. These are your business metrics for the past year. Sarah stared at the professionally formatted reports, revenue growth charts, customer acquisition analytics, profit margin breakdowns, market penetration data. Her small home-based operation laid out like a Fortune 500 company analysis. How did you get these? I have my ways. Elena smiled. The point is, Sarah, you've created something remarkable. 92% customer satisfaction rates, 63% repeat customer rate, profit margins that would make established retailers weep with envy. And you did it all while pregnant, with a sabotaging husband from a spare bedroom. But it's all frozen now. The accounts are frozen. The business model isn't... Elena pulled out another document. I've spent the weekend analyzing your operation, and I have a proposal. Sarah leaned forward despite herself. Your real asset isn't the inventory or even the money. Elena continued. It's your brand authenticity and your customer relationships. What if we rebuild the entire operation around that foundation? I don't understand. Elena's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm Sarah remembered from their mentor sessions years ago. Authentic brand storytelling is the holy grail of modern marketing. Companies spend millions trying to manufacture the kind of genuine connection you've built naturally. Your story building a business while pregnant, overcoming sabotage, fighting for your child's future that's not just inspiring. It's marketing gold. You want me to exploit my personal trauma for business? I want you to leverage your authentic experience to help other women facing similar challenges. Elena corrected. What if we created a consulting firm that specializes in helping women build businesses during life transitions, divorce, pregnancy, career changes, family crises? You'd be the case study that proves it's possible. Sarah felt Sophia kick, as if responding to the energy in the room. But my product business would be the flagship example of what we teach. We rebuild your operation as part of a larger platform. Consulting services, online courses, speaking engagements, book deals, multiple revenue streams that can't be frozen by one vindictive ex-husband. Carlos, who'd been listening quietly from the kitchen doorway, stepped forward. Elena, explain the numbers. Gladly. Elena pulled out financial projections that made Sarah's head spin. Conservative estimates put the consulting business at $2 million in revenue within 18 months. If Sarah's willing to share her story publicly, we're looking at $5 to $10 million within 3 years. Share my story how media interviews, conference speaking, social media presence. The woman who built $1 million business while her husband tried to destroy her, who fought back and won. Elena's voice gained momentum. Sarah, you have no idea how many women are facing exactly what you're going through. They need to see someone who fought back successfully. Sarah's phone buzzed with a notification. Another customer email asking about delayed orders, expressing concern about the company's sudden silence. These were real people who trusted her products for their babies. What about my current customers? We honor every commitment, Elena said firmly. I'll front the capital to fulfill outstanding orders while we restructure. Your reputation stays intact, and your customers become the foundation for the larger platform. And if David tries to claim ownership of the new business, Carlos spoke up, let him try. This new operation will be structured through multiple entities, with Elena and me as founding partners. David can't claim ownership of businesses that didn't exist during your marriage. Sarah looked at these two people who were offering to bet their resources on her success. Her father, whom she'd been too proud to ask for help. Her mentor, who'd driven across the city based on one phone call from a man she'd never met. Why? Sarah asked. Why are you both willing to do this? Elena and Carlos exchanged a look that spoke of shared understanding. Because, Elena said, 40 years ago, I was a young mother whose business partner tried to steal the company we'd built together. A man helped me fight back and rebuild. I swore I'd do the same for another woman when the opportunity arose. And because, Carlos added, I raised a daughter who could build an empire from nothing. Now she needs to remember who she is. Sarah felt tears threatening, but these weren't tears of despair. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt the stirring of something powerful, not just hope, but certainty. If we do this, Sarah said, we do it right. Full transparency, complete legal protection, and every customer commitment honored. Done, Elena said. And when David realizes what we're building, he's going to come after us with everything he has. Let him come, Carlos said quietly. We'll be ready. Sarah placed her hand on her belly, feeling Sophia's strong, steady movement. Her daughter would be born into a world where her mother was no longer a victim, but a woman who'd turned her destruction into foundation for an empire. The phoenix was rising from the ashes, and she was magnificent. The TED-style talk Elena arranged happened 3 weeks later in a downtown conference center, part of a women's entrepreneurship summit that drew attendees from across the region. Sarah stood backstage, one hand protecting her now 9-month pregnant belly, the other clutching note cards she'd memorized but couldn't seem to put down. You don't need those, Elena said gently, taking the cards from Sarah's trembling fingers. You've lived this story. Just tell it. Sarah walked onto the stage to polite applause from an audience of roughly 300 professional women. The lights were brighter than she'd expected, making it difficult to see individual faces, which somehow made it easier to speak. 3 months ago, Sarah began, her voice steady despite her nerves, I was a pregnant woman whose husband was planning to divorce me, take custody of our baby, and leave me homeless and penniless. He thought he'd planned the perfect crime. The audience shifted forward slightly, sensing something authentic in her tone. What he didn't know was that while he was systematically destroying my life, I was building something he couldn't touch, something he couldn't steal, something that would not only survive his attack but turn his betrayal into the foundation of my success. Sarah told her story with the kind of raw honesty that cuts through professional polish and reaches directly to the heart. She talked about discovering the affair through a baby monitor, about realizing her career sabotage, about the moment she understood that the man she'd trusted with everything had been planning her destruction for months. But here's what I learned, Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger. They can freeze your bank accounts, but they can't freeze your knowledge. They can take your house, but they can't take your customer relationships. They can try to destroy your reputation, but they can't touch the authentic value you've created for real people. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. While my ex-husband was planning to leave me with nothing, I was building a business that generated $300,000 in 9 months. While he was documenting my erratic behavior to use against me in court, I was serving thousands of customers who trusted my brand with their children's safety and health. Sarah paused, feeling Sophia kick hard, as if her daughter approved of her mother's fierce honesty. The most important lesson I learned is this: authentic resilience isn't about surviving what someone does to you. It's about building something so strong, so valuable, so true to who you are, that their attacks become irrelevant. She talked about the new consulting platform, about helping other women transform their crisis moments into business opportunities, about the community they were building of women who refused to let anyone define their worth or limit their potential. My ex-husband thought he was destroying me, Sarah concluded. Instead, he freed me to discover who I really was. He thought he was taking everything I had. Instead, He forced me to build something bigger than anything I'd imagined possible." The standing ovation started before Sarah finished her last sentence. But what happened next surprised everyone, including Elena. A woman in the third row stood up and shouted, "How do we help?" within minutes. A dozen other voices joined in, sharing similar stories, asking for contact information, demanding to know how they could support Sarah's mission. The formal presentation ended, but the real impact was just beginning. Elena had arranged for the talk to be professionally filmed, and by evening, the video was uploaded to multiple platforms. Within 24 hours, the video had 50,000 views. Within a week, it hit 1 million. By the end of the second week, Sarah's talk had been viewed over 5 million times across all platforms. The comment section became a forum for women sharing their own stories of financial abuse, business sabotage, and fighting back against men who tried to control their lives. Sarah's business email, which Elena had carefully mentioned during the presentation, received over 3,000 inquiries in the first week. Women wanted consulting services, speaking engagements, business partnerships. Publishers reached out about book deals. Media producers wanted interviews. But the message that meant the most came from an unexpected source. Dr. Rodriguez called on a Thursday morning with excitement in her voice. "Sarah, you need to see the parenting website Baby Center. There's an entire thread about your talk. And it's gotten the attention of some very influential people." The thread was titled "The Pregnant CEO Who Refused to Be Destroyed," and it had over 2,000 comments. But buried in the responses was a post from username Mommy CEO Official that made Sarah's heart stop. This woman's story is exactly why we started our foundation. Women who build businesses while facing personal crisis deserve support, not sabotage. We'd like to offer a partnership opportunity. Sarah clicked on the profile and gasped. Mommy CEO Official belonged to Jennifer Walsh, CEO of a company that had been featured on the cover of Forbes 3 times. Elena's phone rang 5 minutes after Sarah called her. "Jennifer Walsh wants to meet," Sarah said without preamble. The Jennifer Walsh billion-dollar company, Jennifer Walsh. She says she wants to discuss a partnership, something about a foundation that supports women entrepreneurs facing life transitions. Elena was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, do you understand what this means? Jennifer Walsh doesn't make partnership offers lightly. If she's reaching out, it's because your story resonated with her personally. What do I do? You get ready to discover that your little business from your spare bedroom just became a movement." Sarah hung up and walked to her home office, the same room where she'd started with nothing but determination and a laptop. Now the walls were covered with printed screenshots of customer testimonials, partnership offers, and media requests. In the corner, Sophia's crib waited for its occupant, due any day now. Sarah placed her hand on her belly and smiled. "Your mama just changed the world, little girl," she whispered, "and we're just getting started." The courthouse on the morning of the final custody hearing buzzed with an energy that had nothing to do with the legal proceedings. Sarah arrived to find a small crowd of supporters outside the building, women who'd seen her viral talk, customers from her business, and members of the local women's entrepreneurship community Elena had mobilized. "This is unprecedented," Maya said as they walked through the respectful gathering. "I've never seen public support like this for a custody case." Sarah, now carrying 9-month-old Sophia in a designer baby carrier gifted by one of her consulting clients, felt a calm confidence she'd never experienced before. The past 6 months had transformed her from a victim into someone who'd built multiple income streams, established powerful partnerships, and become a recognizable voice in women's entrepreneurship. David waited inside the courthouse with Jessica and his attorney, both looking far less confident than they had 6 months earlier. His startup had indeed failed. exactly as Sarah had predicted when his lack of marketing expertise became apparent to investors. Jessica had moved on to a wealthier target within weeks of the business collapse. "Your Honor," David's attorney began, "my client seeks joint custody of the minor child based on his status as the biological father and his concern for the child's welfare, given the mother's unstable business ventures and public attention-seeking behavior." Sarah almost smiled at the irony. David's attorney was trying to frame her success as evidence of instability. Maya stood with quiet confidence. "Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence of the systematic financial abuse my client endured, the business she built despite that abuse, and the remarkable stability she's achieved as a single mother." The evidence Maya presented painted a clear picture: financial records showing David's manipulation, documentation of his career sabotage, audio recordings of him planning Sarah's destruction, recordings Sarah had legally obtained through private investigators Elena had recommended. But the most powerful evidence was David himself. "Mr. Coleman," Maya said during cross-examination, "you claim to be concerned about the child's welfare. Can you tell the court about your current financial situation?" David's attorney objected, but the judge allowed the question. "I'm between opportunities currently," David said stiffly. "Between opportunities. Is that your way of describing bankruptcy proceedings?" The business faced unexpected challenges. Unexpected challenges such as the loss of the marketing expertise your wife had been providing without compensation or recognition. David's face flushed. "Sarah was never officially involved in my business." Maya pulled out a stack of documents. "These are emails between you and investors, Mr. Coleman. In them, you repeatedly reference your wife's marketing strategies and customer insights as key assets of your company. Would you like me to read them aloud? That's taken out of context. What's taken out of context is your claim that Sarah was uninvolved in business operations while simultaneously taking credit for her contributions to investors." The cross-examination continued for an hour, systematically dismantling David's credibility while highlighting his financial dependence on Sarah's unacknowledged contributions to his failed company. When it was Sarah's turn to testify, she spoke with the same authentic honesty that had made her talk go viral. "Your Honor, I built my business not despite being a mother, but because I wanted to be the kind of mother my daughter could be proud of. Someone who created value in the world, who helped other families, who refused to be defined by someone else's limitations." "Ms. Martinez," the judge said, "the court has reviewed your financial statements. Your business income has increased substantially during these proceedings. Can you explain why?" "Because authenticity resonates, Your Honor. When I shared my story honestly, other women recognized their own struggles. They supported my business because they believed in what I was building." "And what exactly are you building?" Sarah looked at David, then back at the judge. "I'm building a world where women don't have to choose between economic security and personal integrity, where mothers can create businesses that serve their communities while providing for their families, where daughters grow up seeing their mothers as creators of value, not just victims of circumstance." The judge was quiet for a long moment after Sarah finished testifying. "Mr. Coleman, do you have anything you'd like to say before I make my decision?" David stood slowly. For a moment, Sarah thought he might apologize, might show some recognition of the pain he'd caused. Instead, he chose to reveal exactly who he was. "Your Honor, I built a successful company before I met Sarah. Her current business success is just good marketing of a sob story. She's manipulating public sympathy for financial gain." The words hung in the courtroom air like a toxic cloud. David had just dismissed his child's mother's genuine accomplishments as manipulation in front of a judge who'd spent the morning reviewing evidence of his systematic abuse. The judge's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Coleman, You've characterized your ex-wife's business success as manipulation of public sympathy. Do you view supporting women who've faced financial abuse as somehow illegitimate? I think people should succeed on merit, not victimhood. I see. Mr. Martinez, can you explain the merit behind your business success? Sarah could have recited profit margins, customer satisfaction rates, and growth metrics. Instead, she said simply, I created products that helped families, provided excellent customer service, and built trust through consistent quality. The same fundamentals that drive any successful business. Thank you, the judge said. I'm ready to make my decision. The ruling was swift and comprehensive. Full custody to Sarah, with David granted supervised visitation rights contingent on completing parenting classes and anger management counseling. No spousal support required, given Sarah's demonstrated financial independence. Division of marital assets heavily favored Sarah, with the court finding evidence of financial abuse and hidden asset manipulation. As they left the courthouse, David approached Sarah one final time. You think you've won, he said quietly. But you'll never escape what this has made you. Bitter, suspicious, unable to trust anyone. Sarah looked at this man who'd tried to destroy her and felt only pity. David, you taught me something invaluable. You showed me that I'm capable of building something so strong that even deliberate sabotage couldn't stop it. Thank you for that lesson. She walked away without looking back, carrying her daughter toward the group of supporters waiting to celebrate her victory. Behind her, David stood alone in the courthouse hallway, finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd lost and what he'd never possessed the ability to create authentic value in the world. Sarah's empire was complete, and she was just getting started. 2 years later, Sarah stood in the penthouse office of Martinez Rodriguez Consulting, looking out over the city skyline as snow fell gently against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Sophia played quietly on the carpet behind her, building towers with blocks while maintaining a steady stream of toddler commentary about her architectural decisions. The office space was a far cry from the spare bedroom where everything had started. Elena had insisted on the prestigious location when their consulting firm's valuation hit $50 million. Arguing that their clients needed to see physical evidence of the success they promised to help others achieve. Mama, look, Sophia called out, pointing at her block tower. Big like Mama's building. Sarah turned from the window to admire her daughter's creation. At 18 months, Sophia was already showing signs of the determination that had carried Sarah through her darkest moments. She was fearless, curious, and absolutely certain that any problem could be solved with sufficient creativity and persistence. It's beautiful, baby girl, Sarah said, kneeling beside her daughter. Tell me about your design choices. Sophia launched into a detailed explanation that mixed English, Spanish phrases she'd learned from her grandfather Carlos, and words she'd apparently invented herself. Sarah listened with the same attention she gave to million-dollar client presentations, because teaching Sophia that her ideas mattered was more important than any business success. Elena knocked on the open office door, carrying the kind of smile that usually preceded very good news. The Forbes interview is live online, she announced. Sarah had almost forgotten about the magazine feature. Between client calls, speaking engagements, and the book tour for Building While Breaking How Crisis Becomes Capital, media interviews had become routine rather than exciting. How does it look? Sarah asked, not moving from the floor where she was helping Sophia add another block to her tower. See for yourself, Elena said, pulling up the article on her tablet. The headline is, From Divorce Court to Empire, How Sarah Martinez Built a $50 million Business from Her Ex-Husband's Betrayal. Sarah glanced at the screen, noting the professional photo they'd taken in this same office, with Sophia on her lap and the city skyline in the background. The image captured exactly what she'd wanted to convey: a successful businesswoman who'd never forgotten what she was really building for. The interview is good, Elena continued, but the comments section is extraordinary. Thousands of women sharing their own stories, asking for help, offering to support other women facing similar situations. Any responses from David? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer would be no. Radio silence, as usual, though there was an interesting piece of gossip from Maya yesterday. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Her attorney had become a close friend over the past 2 years, and her courthouse connections meant she heard everything. Apparently, David approached a law firm about suing you for defamation based on your book and interviews, Elena said. They declined to take the case after reviewing the public records from your divorce proceedings. Sarah felt no satisfaction in David's continued struggles. His failure to rebuild his life wasn't her victory. It was simply the natural consequence of a man who'd confused manipulation with talent, destruction with strategy. Speaking of legal matters, Elena continued, the partnership papers with the Jennifer Walsh Foundation are ready for your signature. $50 million in funding for women entrepreneurs facing life transitions, with you as the executive director. And the time commitment, 2 days a week, maximum. We've structured it so you can maintain your consulting practice and speaking schedule while running the foundation. Sarah looked at Sophia, who had abandoned her blocks in favor of examining the snow falling outside the window. Her daughter pressed tiny handprints against the glass, delighted by the cold sensation. What do you think, Sophia? Sarah asked. Should Mama help more women build empires? Sophia considered this question with the seriousness of a Fortune 500 board member. Help Mama friends, she declared. Build big. That settles it, Sarah said, reaching for the partnership papers. As she signed the documents that would expand her mission globally, Sarah reflected on the unexpected gifts David's betrayal had given her. Without his systematic attempt to destroy her life, she might never have discovered her capacity for building something extraordinary from nothing. Without his financial abuse, she might never have learned to create genuine security that couldn't be taken away by someone else's decisions. Without his calculated cruelty, she might never have found her authentic voice or understood the power of transforming personal pain into public purpose. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carlos. Saw the Forbes article. Your mother would be proud. Building something that helps families. Just like we always knew you would. Sarah's mother had died when she was 16, too early to see the woman her daughter would become. But Sarah had no doubt that Maria Martinez would approve of the empire built not on destruction or exploitation, but on the radical idea that women could transform their worst moments into their greatest strengths. Mama, snow stopped, Sophia announced, pointing out the window. Sarah looked outside to see the city sparkling under fresh snow, clean and bright with possibility. In a few hours, she'd meet with 3 new clients, women facing divorce, job loss, and business sabotage. Tomorrow, she'd speak at a conference for female entrepreneurs. Next week, she'd sign another book deal. But right now, she was simply a mother playing blocks with her daughter in an office they'd built together, one authentic choice at a time. What should we build next? Sophia. Sophia grinned with the confidence of a child who'd never doubted that her mother could build anything. Everything, Mama, we build everything. Sarah laughed, gathering her daughter into her arms. The empire was complete, but the building never stopped. There were always more women to help, more authentic stories to tell, more proof that the people who try to destroy you often end up creating exactly what the world needs most. Outside the window, the city stretched endlessly in all directions, full of women who didn't yet know they possessed the power to transform their breaking points into breakthrough moments. Sarah Martinez was ready to show them how.